Hey everybody, and welcome to Stoneridge Connect here today. Thank you for joining me. Today's topic will be smart strategies for cloud data storage, and I am very excited to talk through some of the options that we have not only in the Microsoft platform, but also give you general strategies and kind of tips and tricks to manage your data, no matter whether it's on-prem, in the cloud, or with Microsoft, or with some other cloud. So thanks for joining me here. Just to kind of reiterate on the session topic, just to read it out again here. So as businesses continue to scale, managing and storing data efficiently becomes more critical. Today, we will be exploring effective cloud data storage strategies to help you manage large volumes of data securely and cost effectively. Learn about different cloud storage options, best practices for organizing data in those cloud data storage options, as well as securing your data, how to optimize storage for performance and accessibility. And then we'll have practical insights throughout to build a robust cloud storage strategy that meets your business needs. If that doesn't sound interesting, well, we've got some other sessions going on here. But if that is, looking forward to chatting here over the next half hour. Who I am, Mick Swartzendruber here. I'm a solution architect for data and analytics for Stoneridge Software. Really my background, high level, I've got about 10 years of experience in the data analytics area, 7 specifically to the Microsoft stack between D365, Azure, as well as the low-code platforms like Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power BI. So that's kind of who I am, and looking forward to chatting here. So what are we going to be talking about? First and foremost, going to give a little high-level overview of kind of what is cloud data, what is on-prem data, what is data. Just kind of level set here before we get into the, well, why do I care about a cloud data strategy? What does it matter to me? What's the value that I'm going to get out of making sure that our organization and our team has strategies around our data? Then we'll get into both personal and team data strategies as well as enterprise data strategies. They're different tools, they're different strategies, there's different approaches to both of them. So wanted to separate those out and talk about them individually as well as some of the Microsoft tools that can help you with those things as well as general strategies to manage both personal, team, and enterprise data. Then we'll wrap up here. So what we have next is, well, what is cloud data? What is on-premise data? Well, they say we live in the age of data, age of information. What is data in general? I mean, it's anything. It's any of your documents, any of your data points, any of your financial statements, any of your transactions. Everything that we transact as a business here is a data point. And where you store that, is a big decision and has impacts for the larger organization. So when someone says, on-premise, and how I'm going to kind of approach that here throughout this conversation. The on-premise stuff is the stuff that's sitting in one of your server rooms. It's those, old server racks or new server racks that have anything from files on, a share, that share drive, or it's those applications, those SQL servers, those things that you're running in-house that you guys have full control of the server itself in one of your facilities. The other piece that I really do want to focus on too is that direct on endpoint. What I mean by endpoint is your laptop, your phone, a hard drive, a USB stick. That can sometimes be overlooked as on-premise data as well. But the second that comes off a computer down from the cloud onto your endpoint, that all of a sudden becomes on-premise as well, and it needs to kind of be treated as such. So that's another point that I'm going to talk about here today, and wanted to establish that right off the bat. And then we have that hosted data center. So a lot of organizations are, moving off of that server room on site and moving that into a hosted data center in, various locations and stuff like that across the nation. You'll sometimes hear that talked about as a private cloud or, a hosted data center. While that is kind of a cloud practice, and a lot of those things can carry over, which is why I got the stars there. That's a little bit in between. For most intents and purposes, that hosted data center is going to be considered a little bit more on-premise. While it's not necessarily sitting in your server room and it's being managed by another company that you're paying to manage that server for you. you're still paying for that server, you're still paying for that rack, you're still paying for those upgrades and things like that. So when it comes to this conversation, that really is considered an on-premise system still. What does it mean for cloud? Well, you see it there. It's just throw a little fluffy cloud in front of the server rack and all of a sudden you're in the cloud. All jokes aside, what that means is, really utilizing one of those three major cloud providers. You've got Azure, you've got Google Cloud, which you'll also hear mentioned as or referred to as GCS, and then you've got your Azure Web Services, AWS. So those are going to be your main three cloud providers. They all provide very similar things, and there's different advantages and disadvantages to each of them. But when we talk cloud data, that's really what that means, is utilizing one of those three cloud providers to move the data and host the data and manage the data. The big difference there between the hosted data center and the cloud is the fact that you don't manage any of it. You just say, hey, I want this piece of compute power. Hey, I want this piece of storage. You don't know where that server lives, how much, what that's on, and you don't do anything. You just say, hey, I want storage, and they figure out the rest. And that's kind of the main difference there between that hosted data center and a cloud data center. So from here, why should you care? First and foremost, there can be cost efficiencies if you have a good, clean cloud data strategy when moving, files, data, whatever. While you obviously pay for that, per instance, per minute compute, things like that, what you're not doing, like I, implied before, was you're not managing the servers themselves. So while there's obviously costs that go along with it, there's some of those soft costs that drop along the side, and you can really realize some real value when it comes to not only bottom line, but also, value add work from employees and stuff like that at your organization. Good cloud strategy can improve data accessibility and collaboration, mostly around the fact that people have what data they need, when they need it, and where they need it. And with that, having these things on cloud servers, you can increase that collaboration. Those, you guys, I'm sure, have seen, the Google Docs and the Word Online, Excel Online, and stuff like that, where you've got multiple people working in the same spreadsheet, and people are seeing the updates that the others are making real time. There's huge value in that, and that's something that you get by moving those files off of on-prem and into the cloud. You also can get enhanced data security and compliance if done properly. You can also get decreased data security and compliance, which is why having a solid strategy for these kinds of things is so important. The big thing there is, when it's on-prem, when it's on a USB, while it's physically secure, if someone takes it, now all of a sudden they've got access and some of those kinds of things. Whereas when you're in the cloud, you've got that cloud access, your single profile that goes into all the different systems, and we'll talk about this a little bit later as well. But with those on-prem systems, a lot of times they've got their own security. You've got to manage it in multiple different places, and as you move things up into the cloud, if done properly, you're only managing it in one spot, and you can have those roles and responsibilities, role-based permissions really nailed down in one spot that propagates into all of your systems instead of managing it individually. And finally, kind of mentioned before, with the data when you need it, or where you need it, when you need it, and how you need it, there's a lot of opportunities as you move data to the cloud to really promote those data-driven decision-making opportunities. You can give people analytics, you can give people, strategic documentation, you can give people, all of these kinds of things that they need to make those strong decisions when they can, where they can. So there's a lot of opportunity there as you move to the cloud for improving that data-driven decision-making opportunity. And finally, I don't know if you've heard about this thing before, but AI, there's a lot of advantages there moving to the cloud. And quite frankly, a lot of this stuff is only available if you move your stuff to the cloud when it comes to, kind of charging those computes and doing all the deep analysis that is needed for those AI workloads. As you move to the cloud, it really unlocks that possibility between the different platforms. So that's a little overview on why you care and kind of the opportunities there when it comes to cloud data, not only storage, but strategy and approaches and stuff like that as well. So let's start with personal and team data. And so what I mean by this is kind of those documents that are pertinent to a specific team or department. Maybe, you know, SOW templates, PowerPoint templates for a certain pitch, or certain Excel documents that have, whether it's project management or, you know, budget analysis, or, you know, department projections, whether it's service orders or whether it's, you know, your inventory management, you know, those kinds of things that are really just pertinent to one team or department and not necessarily things that the whole enterprise needs or even wants access to. In addition to that, the personal data, you know, the stuff, the documents that you store on your computer, both personal and for work, you know, your pictures, whether you've got, you know, just kind of little note documents, or, you know, just those things that you're working on individually, that don't necessarily need to be shared out to the team. You know, individual development plans, you know, those kinds of career growth things as well. So that's kind of what I'm going to be talking about here. And really, none of this, I think, is going to be too much of a surprise for anybody, but there's really kind of what I see, especially in the Microsoft world. And like I said, there's corollaries over to Google and Amazon as well. Obviously, I'm a Microsoft guy, so I know most of the Microsoft stuff, and that's what we're going to be focused on here. But there's really going to be those 6 kind of main areas that you see personal and team data being stored. So first and foremost, you got your laptop, you got your desktop, whatever computer that you're working off of, you're going to see data there. The other piece of on-prem, like I said, kind of that external hard drive, whether it is truly an external hard drive, whether it's a USB stick, you know, whatever, and you've got that shared drive, whether that's, you know, being hosted on truly on-prem with a, you know, file server, or if it's kind of that managed service file server. Those are going to be kind of your on-prem. The biggest things that, you know, you kind of want to focus on there is just using those endpoint management softwares. So if you've got Intune, if you've got some of those, you know, tools where you can make sure that, you know, people aren't taking a whole bunch of data off of their computer onto a USB or onto an external hard drive, you know, those are some of the things that you're going to have to really focus on when it comes to that on-prem data, because, you know, that is, from a risk perspective, that's your largest vector of risk, is when people take business data off of their, you know, endpoints, and bring them somewhere where they shouldn't. So to me, that's kind of one of the biggest pieces that you guys want to make sure that you're working with as an organization, is just making sure you've got your endpoint management, you've got all of that kind of data loss prevention policies and stuff like that on those actual computers themselves, and not necessarily just on the documents themselves. The other piece that we have here is, you know, the cloud versions of some of those. Is, you know, SharePoint is kind of its own thing. You know, that's we'll talk a little bit more about SharePoint, but that's been a classic storage. You know, that first kind of cloud storage solution for a lot of organizations is putting stuff onto SharePoint. While that can get messy, and I'm sure you guys have had these conversations around organizations before, where it's like, okay, well, when should this be on SharePoint? When should this be on Teams? Which obviously Teams is the newer thing, but which SharePoint? How do we manage our SharePoint? That's a big thing. And there's a lot of different solutions to that, especially as, you know, SharePoint recently has kind of forced everyone to go to those new cloud SharePoints. And there's a lot of things to talk about there, which we will. And having a solid strategy is critical to making sure people are doing things efficiently and doing things right. The other pieces that you know, Microsoft has really started pushing, and, you know, really kind of made a mainstream for both personal and, you know, enterprise organizations when it comes to personal and team storage, is OneDrive and Teams. Now, honestly, both of those are really just SharePoint on the back end. Everything is SharePoint when it comes to Microsoft, but they give you absolutely fantastic things when it comes to security and, you know, collaboration, especially in those OneDrive and Teams areas. So OneDrive is a fantastic, you know, kind of alternative or supplement to that laptop and desktop, so that if something does happen to the laptop or external hard drive, you know, it's backed up to the cloud. You can even do things like sync your desktop up into OneDrive. For those of you that have 75 things on your desktop, you can clear that off, and that'll all be on OneDrive, so you can have that clean desktop there. Actually see your background picture But really that OneDrive kind of kills the need for external hard drive unless there's, really sensitive data, if you're working in government, if you're working in some of those kinds of things where the external hard drives are still needed. But OneDrive is really great for a lot of that. So most enterprise licenses come with a full terabyte of storage per person in OneDrive. And then, we can talk about SharePoint, or we will talk about SharePoint storage and some of that in a little bit later. But that is a great option and really should be utilized by a lot of organizations for just backup purposes and collaboration purposes. And Teams, we'll talk about Teams a little more here in a bit, but fantastic thing. Obviously, this is where those Microsoft shops are going to hold their calendars, hold their Teams, hold their chats. You can have alternate apps and stuff like that. It's an absolutely fantastic tool, and if utilized properly, can really increase collaboration and really help kind of move those files off of on-prem and into the cloud. So, real quick comparison between SharePoint and Teams, when you should use one, when you should use the other. Like I said, it's a big conversation in a lot of organizations right now. And so just to kind of baseline that, SharePoint is going to give you much more flexibility on look and feel. With that, though, it's going to be harder to manage. You're going to be able to post, cleaner articles, communication sites and stuff like that, where, it can be used for more than just file storage. Where Teams can too, but it's, you're limited to the Teams channel and kind of those threads and some of that kind of stuff, where it's not necessarily as pretty as you can make SharePoint. From there, SharePoint, kind of as I mentioned, it's just a website. It can be accessed anywhere. It's that cloud profile that you log into. It's great. The benefit with Teams is that it's all in one. Like I said, your chat's there, your meetings there, you're living in there most of the day. And if you establish those policies with, how your teams are organized and where documents are held and some of that kind of stuff, really, you can work out of Teams, for better or for worse, almost the whole day, which is nice to be in just that one app. Both can be externally shared to vendors or partners that you guys are working with. So that's one thing to note, is this kind of, outside collaboration can totally be done very easily. When it comes to the storage, so SharePoint is an organization-based storage policy. So when you get a license for Microsoft, and kind of set up that enterprise licensing, you get a 1 terabyte shared pool for all SharePoint sites. So it doesn't matter how many SharePoint sites you use, they don't use individual. You can set limits to individual sites and site collections, but as a whole, it consumes your organization's SharePoint storage. It gives you a 1 terabyte base, and then for every license that you have, you get an additional 10 gigabytes per user licenses for most licenses with Microsoft. This is included in all the enterprise licenses, so this isn't an additional cost. It is something that everyone can use and you're already paying for, which is, again, just another implication there of, the cost savings and some of that stuff if you're managing your own servers and data centers and some of that. You're already paying for it. Let's use it. Teams, on the other hand, it actually uses both SharePoint and OneDrive. So like I said, Teams on the back end, all the file storage is actually just SharePoint. So is OneDrive, but that SharePoint piece, when you put files into channels and teams, that goes against your global SharePoint storage capacity. When you put stuff in chats, that goes against the personal OneDrive capacity. Each person in the organization on most licenses comes with 1 terabyte per person. Again, a lot of storage there per person per license, but that's just kind of one thing to note, is when you share those files inside of chats and some of those more personal interactions, those go against your own personal OneDrive, as they really just share OneDrive links. Whereas if you're putting it into the teams and channels, you're going to be seeing that go against your global SharePoint capacity. The one thing with Teams is that it is no longer included in the general Microsoft Office SKU. It is now an add-on, really down to some legislation that happened in Europe, but now those are some separate SKUs. So while most organizations, especially currently, will be grandfathered into that old SKU and keep on using that for now, for organizations that might be not on the Microsoft platform, just to let you know, Teams is an additional cost per user per month now. But when you do that, it unlocks everything inside of Teams. So some teams' best practices here. You know, sure, organizations getting into it, it can be a little confusing on how to organize. Really, the best way that I've seen is each, and you're going to hear me say the word team a lot here. Thanks, Microsoft. Each team inside of Teams really should kind of map to a team. So for example, at Stone Ridge, you know, we have, you know, I'm a part of a team that is, you know, my data team. And then I've also got a general Stone Ridge team, where different channels under there can kind of give you a little bit more information around, you know, certain verticals, whether it's certain customers or certain topics and some of that kind of stuff. But really, what you want to avoid is having a million different teams inside of Microsoft Teams, because things get really messy there. And as we're going to kind of talk, these channels are different topics, but the files between different channels aren't shared. So as you're saving documents, it can get really convoluted really quickly. So really just kind of have those strategies early when it comes to channel manipulation and file structure, and stick to it. Because if you stray from that, things can get really messy, and all of a sudden that ability to find your data, find your documents when you need it, where you need it, it's not where you need it, and can get really complex. The other piece that I'll say here on Teams, explore those apps and tabs. There's really great things that you can do across the top when it comes to adding websites to channels, when it comes to adding apps like Power Apps or other kind of, you know, third-party apps right into Teams. Again, it really can be that all-in-one HubSpot for everything that you do. All right, now we're going to get on to enterprise data here quickly. The three main areas of data storage types on Azure, again, AWS and GCS are going to have, or GCP, I suppose, are going to have their own corollaries to this. But in the Azure world, Azure File Storage is really going to be that one-to-one cloud version of your shared drive. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's got that hierarchical storage solution where you can have those folders, you can have those subfolders, all that kind of stuff. It is SMB compatible, which is the main reason why it's kind of that one lift and shift. So you can have kind of that endpoint management and access kind of control there. But this is going to really be, if you just want to get off of those file servers that you have in your office and move them up into the cloud, this is going to be what you do. It's great. It works awesome for those familiar with file shares and stuff like that. It's very familiar, and is pretty low cost. Then the other two here are blob storage and data lake. Data lake is really just a hierarchical blob storage, which gives you a little bit more capabilities to take things, organize things, do things of that nature. But blob storage, what that's going to give you is it's just going to give you a blob. It's going to give you, you know, just this amorphous blob of storage that you can throw files. It's really great for those unstructured files where you're like, okay, I've got all these enterprise reports, I've got all these things that I just want to get out into the cloud so I can, you know, start processing them or, you know, use them for other applications and some of those kinds of things. But it's just going to be flat, it's going to be basic, it's going to be cheap, and you can especially use it for some of that archive data where you're like, hey, I only might need to get this once a year. You can get those things like cold storage or archive storage where, you know, it is dirt cheap, with some of those access limits and stuff like that, to hold really your enterprise archive data. Like I said, data lake, this is going to be a mix between the two when it comes to hierarchical. So you can have some folders, you can have sub accounts and things like that. The big difference here is data lake can be used for either structured or unstructured data. So data lakes, a lot of times you're going to be seeing analytics workloads and data workloads where you're trying to merge multiple different systems of data into one spot so that you can start taking that next level of data analytics and you know, data-driven decision-making workloads. So really what you see here is that this can be your one-stop shop for all data needs, unstructured or structured. How you should approach it here, data lake strategies, focus on what matters first. Don't get lost in the ocean. You know, really, when you say data lake, people kind of sometimes go to unstructured data and, oh, we can get all of our PDFs and, oh, we can start processing these things. And focus on what your business needs first. Sometimes you don't need to go through all those unstructured data pieces first. Sometimes you just want to get some multi-system analytics going. So get that structured data in there, focus on that first. While it's a little bit more of a, you know, traditional data lake workflow, make sure you're focusing on what value is right there in front of you instead of trying to do some of the things that, you know, might be a little bit, you know, out there and not necessarily, you know, that first low-hanging fruit. When you do get to some of the unstructured data, the PDFs, the documents, utilize tags. This is going to give you that metadata that as you start trying to crawl and start trying to use a little bit more AI workflows, this is what's going to give that file context and is going to be huge for that implementation. Now, as you're looking at tools to partner with things with unstructured data, it pairs very well with Power Automate and some of the AI builders that of Power Automate to kind of process OCR, you know, advanced OCR, those formats, as well as Azure AI services, which are kind of built into Power Automate. But really, when you come to chugging, processing, all that kind of data, I would highly recommend looking into those tools here. For structured data, pairs great. Azure Synapse Analytics, Databricks, external warehousing tools like Snowflake, integrations, you can have integration hubs, all that kind of stuff going through it. It's a really fantastic tool across the board when it comes to structured data and really starts unlocking that data platform for you guys to take that next step. Now, I would be remiss not to mention Microsoft Fabric. It is a new offering from Microsoft, which really takes the data lake and takes all of that kind of high code complexity into a low code platform. Really what Fabric is it's the Power Apps to app building. It is the low code data solution that puts everything into one spot for you and gives you some great guardrails. It's a fully managed data analytics platform. The great thing about it is it's consistent upfront pricing. You're not paying as you go and kind of, you know, worrying about a query that's going to, you know, make your Azure bill go crazy. You know what you're paying every month, and it gives you the full data stack of Data Factory, AI modeling, Synapse Analytics, data engineering, Power BI, all of those things. It's a modern end-to-end one-stop shop for all of your data needs. And I would love to talk about it with you guys some more here, but we are out of time. So if you guys are interested in learning more about the Microsoft platform, especially around the, you know, Synapse Analytics and some of those data workflows, you know, please reach out. I am more than happy to have some conversations with you to see how we can partner with you guys, and even just informational sessions. Love to have them, love to talk about it. That's why I'm in the position I am. I love it. And again, thank you guys for so much of the time today. And yeah, thanks guys.